Welcome to Based Layers again.
Welcome. This is an impromptu video show where we discuss the niche within a niche intersection of Bitcoin, 3D printing, and computer-aided design. So we're going to talk for a little bit, and then Printer has one of his designs that I'm excited to dig into.
Yeah, let's go. The show no one asked for. We're doing it anyway, so.
They just don't realize how badly they want it, though, and I guess it's our job to convey that.
Yeah, that's the signal.
That is the signal. So one question that came up after we did the first show, did you see, I haven't looked, how many views did the first show get? I'm going to be gratuitous and ask.
I'll be totally honest, I didn't look in the last 2 days, but I did have a look after we published it, and I think it was in the low hundreds, like 107 or 110. Last time I looked,
digits.
That's about 10x more. That's 10x more than I expected, so that's great.
Me as well. So yeah. Anyhow, so one of the questions that came up, I don't remember if it was in a DM or in a response to a post about the show, and it's an evergreen question for people who are curious about 3D printing, is what kind of printer would be a good one to start with as, my initial starter printer. And I have a couple of ideas on that. I'm sure that you have some ideas that may overlap or may not overlap. But if I can share my screen, I have a couple of tabs that we can show people my two suggestions, and then I'm happy to get your feedback.
Since you're prepared and I'm not, please do share your screen.
I forgot that I had to initiate that process. So I will be sharing the entire screen. Bam. Okay, infinite regression. I always get a kick out of that. The first one, which is, it's a Prusa Mini. And this is a machine that is definitely well suited for someone who's just getting started out with 3D printing. I have sort of a love-hate relationship with Prusa because a Prusa was the first printer that I purchased, and I owned several Prusa printers after that, and I have now transitioned to another brand that we'll talk about next. But whenever someone who's new to 3D printing asks about a good first printer, the Prusa Mini definitely deserves to be a part of the conversation. Just to note, these, I believe, only come as semi-assembled printers, so it's not something that you're just going to be able to take out of the box and hit the ground running with. There is some minor assembly that, if I had to estimate, may take an hour or two. It's not super difficult, but it will take a little bit of time to get the device to its final assembled and functional state. For me, the price tag, it looks like $459. I'm not sure if that includes shipping or any other fees, but $460 is a little bit steep for, I think, what you get out of this printer for the size it produces. But I have to acknowledge it does have a very nice standalone UI that you can use to access various settings and initiate prints and tweak things, and it really is a nice package. I just think it's a little spendy. And then my second recommendation will be a printer that I've actually never tried, which is kind of ironic, but it is this Bambu Lab A1 Mini. And as you can see, it comes in at $250, plus I assume there's a shipping cost that accompanies that. And I don't know anything about this printer other than I own 5 other Bambu Lab machines. I've heard good things about this printer, and for me, Bambu Lab has a reputation for quality. And so those are my 2 recommendations. Printer, do you have any other printers you'd recommend, or do you have any other insights on these?
Yeah, I'll just start with the Prusa Mini. As you said, the price tag is a bit steep, but on the other hand, it's just Prusa. They are producing everything in Europe. There is no or next to no China manufacturing involved. which also is kind of a guarantee for good quality parts. The Prusa Mini was a bit of a letdown for me when I got it initially, because Prusa Link didn't work, and having to buy a $100 Raspberry Pi just to make it network connected wasn't nice, but they fixed that now. So Prusa Link works. It's still very basic. There's no camera, but you can upload prints, start prints, and see how far they're done, which
And
is good.
that's a good point, if I can jump in there. That Prusa Link, for people who may not be familiar with that, a lot of these printers, it's very convenient to operate them in kind of like a remote manner. So you're not doing this sneakernet game of moving a thumb drive or a memory card between the printer, because you're typically going to use a laptop or desktop computer to take a model and then slice it. And that sliced model is basically the instructions that the printer needs to lay out the plastic in the correct pattern that builds the object. And to communicate that sliced model to the printer, it is super easy just to be able to click a print button from your laptop instead of having to move a file. So that's a feature that most of these printers have, and that I didn't realize that Prusa Mini even offered that. So that's really cool.
It does have an ETH port, like a networking port in the back.
Does this one have a Wi-Fi
Yeah.
built into it, or that's
Nope, no Wi-Fi.
no? So I had set up. I can't think of the name of the software suite, but it's a Raspberry Pi based
Octoprint,
tool that you
probably.
can connect. Probably a 02W would be the most cost effective one these days, but you can connect one of the more capable Raspberry Pis to the printer and operate it remotely that way.
Yeah, I absolutely love Octoprint, but I
That's what it
also
is.
have to say, in 224, where like the Bambu Lab printers, as you said, come with a finished web UI where you can send your prints from the slicer, having to rely on third-party software is not. I mean, it's absolutely in the spirit of RepRap and in the 3D printing do-it-yourself spirit, but especially for beginners, maybe another hurdle.
I do
So
have to admit, I feel weird about Bamboo. When you send something from your computer to the printer, it has to go through their cloud. And given, I guess, some of the concerns about Chinese industrial surveillance, that just gives me kind of a yucky feeling.
yeah, agreed. You don't necessarily have to use that cloud. There is a so-called LAN-only mode for the Bamboo printers, or for the Bamboo Lab
Mm.
printers, but you lose the camera feature and a lot of other
Oh,
convenient cloud computing
do you
parts.
use your camera feature very often to monitor prints? Every once in a while, I'll do a time lapse that shows something being printed, but I find myself just very rarely using that feature.
Honestly, no, because it became such a pain to monitor 6+ printers by camera, especially because some of the cameras have a delay when loading the picture.
Mm.
It was a bit of a big annoyance, so I now have a big IP camera in my printing room, which faces all of the printers.
And
So
I assume it's at a resolution where you can see what you need to see.
yes, I can see at least if there are spaghetti or not.
I'm still on the sneaker net. I've thought about that, actually, setting up an IP cam, but for me, I'm walking downstairs to get to the printers to check to make sure if uh, the spaghetti monster rarely strikes, but sometimes I don't realize that a printer's low on filament and it'll run out mid print, and
Yeah, that
it's been
happens
sitting
too.
for a couple hours and I don't realize it. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, on that, walking down there to the printers, I recently checked with the Sustainable Health app, and it tells me I made 500 or 600 height meters just from running to the printers and back.
So I'm not familiar with that unit of distance that you just referenced. What was that?
Height or height meters. That's what we call it in
Oh,
German. It's Höhenmeter. It's
okay.
what you the
So
amount
is
of.
is is a flight of
Oh,
stairs, I guess, like two and some change height meters, or what's the?
um, Yeah, just when you go another meter above sea level or that, then you have made one height meter. I think that's
Okay,
how the app is calculating it.
Which of course makes way more sense than the metric that we use over here. They just call it flights of stairs. I don't even know that they use sea level as a ultimate reference point. I don't know what. I guess the reference point is maybe the elevation where you wake up in the morning. But
Exactly.
yeah, they just call it flights of stairs.
Okay.
Can I ask about the Prusa Mini? If you're living in Europe, with it being assembled and sold there, do you avoid the VAT buying a Prusa Mini?
I do because I'm a company, but I don't think so.
For some reason, I thought the VAT
No, VAT is like
was protective from imports, so that if it was made outside of Europe, then
no,
you didn't have to.
we all
You
have
all
to
have to
pay.
pay it.
Yes, taxation.
So I misunderstood that.
No, I think where this comes from is because all the Chinese manufacturers, they don't pre-collect the VAT or the VAT. So it has to be done by customs then when the product comes. Because they just don't care. But yeah, European company will just add the VAT to every purchase unless you're a company and VAT exempt.
So with the VAT, do you also have to pay some kind of local sales tax typically?
That's what it is. That the VAT
that
is the sales tax.
Got it. Okay. I thought it was some sort of add-on import tariff or something like that, but I misunderstood. So it always seems like a scam to me on, I've noticed lately on Alibaba and AliExpress, they will add on an amount for sales tax to your purchase, unless of course you have documentation to show that you're a business and you're exempt from sales tax. But I don't have any proof of this, but I think it's just a total scam for them to add an extra percentage onto the order, because there's no way that AliExpress is coordinating with the state that I live in, the state of Missouri in the United States, to report all of its sales and make good on the sale. That is not happening. So and they put up such hurdles, because I do operate a business, so I should be exempt from the sales tax, and I've tried multiple times to provide the right documentation to qualify for an exemption from the sales tax on there, and they intentionally make it this opaque, unresponsive process that you, like, even if you're legitimately not subject to the sales tax, I haven't figured out how to become exempt from it. So I'm convinced it's like a stealth money grab for Alibaba especially.
Probably we can thank the EU for that. They imposed that crap on them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know the history of it, but back to our printer discussion.
Yes.
One other thing I did want to mention is that a lot of people ask about less expensive printers that I believe are also Chinese in origin. Probably the most popular of which is the Ender series. I know you have more familiarity with those than I do. A lot of people out there will swear by their Ender. For a while, Ender 3 V2, I think, was the preferred version of it. I purchased one Ender 3 V2, and I put several hours into it and could not get it printing a consistent first layer. I think there was a defect in one of the hardware components in the frame, but I paid so little for it, and it seemed like it was just going to take time and energy to resolve, and so I ended up giving that printer away. So my personal recommendation is, it's kind of like they say Linux is free if you don't value your time. With those Ender printers, sometimes the amount of additional accessories and tweaks and tuning that you have to do to keep the machine running well, in my view, it might make sense to just pay a little bit more up front and get a machine that's going to come out of the box in a more consistent, operable state. But I'll let you chime in on that.
Okay. Yeah, Creality. I'm personally avoiding them like the Plick. That's just personal preference. The Ender 3 was, when it came out, it was priced so competitively that it absolutely shook up the market. The subsequent versions of the Ender 3 weren't really better, but priced the same. So yeah, as you said, a lot of tinkering can be involved. And I think the people who all love the Enders Daily that you mentioned are the same people who put in hours and hours of upgrades. Because I did this myself with China printers, and I still love some of them. Like my artillery sidewinder, I think that thing got upgrades worth more than the printer itself by now, probably. But yeah, Creality is not my piece of cake. I think as a nice entry-level printer is the one you have open, the Bambalab A1, as long as you don't plan to print anything TPU related, because with flexible filaments, the A series is no good. I don't have the A1 myself, but I had the A1 Mini. So I had the A1 here for 2 or 3 weeks, then it self-destructed.
Was it an earlier version, or was it
No, it was the standard retail version, which I bought, I think, late last December when it came out. And yeah, did a few test prints, which went fine with PLA, then loaded about 100 of the rugged build buttons in the slicer, slice them, and those are printed from TPU, like the flexible filament, which likes to bend a bit. And yeah, the printer loaded the TPU, started printing, and then made what we call a blob of death, so a blob of plastic which encases the hot end. And then I found the biggest flaw with this A1 series. They invented, or they have a rapid change hot end, which is just the nozzle and the heat break, and whatever is also in there. They are clamped onto the rest of the printer with two very fragile clamps. And the problem was that blob of plastic just pushed the hot end away from the clamps, bent the clamps, and there was absolutely no way in hell to reattach a new hot end. So the printer was effectively dead.
And I'm peeking at some of the specs here. It seems like, at least officially, they say they support TPU, but what I'm hearing from you is that in practicality, that didn't work out.
It has a direct drive hot end, so it should be able to print it. But yeah, when you run into the risk of permanently damaging the printer to the point of it being unusable, then yeah.
Right.
So I probably would say Bambalab great printers, but I'm personally sticking to the Core XY machines like the P1P or X1 Carbon P1S.
Sure. And a couple of things, more background information here. So there are different types of 3D printing filament that you can use in a lot of these printers. And for the purposes of our conversation, PLA is what I print in the most. It is a hard plastic. It's not the hardest plastic, but it's generally hard enough for a lot of the things that I print. But this filament that printer's referencing, called TPU, is a softer plastic that, I wouldn't say it's rubber-like, but it has definitely that more of that kind of rubber-like flexibility. And that can be a challenge for a lot of printers depending on where the drive motor is. So my question for you is, given your experience with the A1 Mini and what happened with the TPU, what was the support experience like? Did you just kind of have to write that one off, or did they make good on it, or what happened there?
Just to be clear, the A1 Mini and the A1 are two different printers. So the A1 Mini is just a smaller version of the A1. I had the A1, so I can't really speak for the Mini, just so that is clear for the viewer. The support experience was surprisingly painless for a Chinese company. First I tried to repair the printer myself, like I always do. That took a good 2.5 hours to get all the plastic off, because when you can't heat the hot end, normally with a normal printer, you heat the hot end and then just pull off the plastic, which is stuck onto there. But yeah, when you can't heat the hot end, you have to like chisel it off piece by piece. That wasn't fun. I documented the whole process with a few videos and a few pictures and sent them all to Bamboo Lab. And then it took about 4 days until a customer service rep answered. They first wanted to send me a new hard end and a new build plate. I don't know why the build plate, because the build plate was fine. I just told them I have no interest in trying to get this printer fixed, because this quick change hard end, which self-destructs, is a design oversight in my book. And just sent it back. That took another 4 days, I think, and then I got a return label. And then I had to wait for the printer to arrive at their packing facility. And I think another week later, they just refunded what I paid for it.
I mean, it's a pain, but that's...
Yeah, but it could have been worse, honestly.
Right. I'm trying to think of anything else that could be relevant for people who are, curious or brand new, just getting started. Nothing's coming to mind unless you have anything.
Since I just talked against reality, one of the Chinese brands that I've had rather good experiences with was Elegoo with their Neptune series. These are fairly capable entry-level printers. They all come with a nice touchscreen. They all have Clipper inbuilt, so they have the Clipper web interface. Clipper is just a different operating system for a 3D printer. There are two. One is Marlin, the other is Clipper. And Clipper is supporting input shapers, so you can print a bit faster. And they are. Need a bit of I needed a bit of time, like a week, to get into the flow of this printer. And they, back in the day, when I got it, they had a bit of a firmware flaw, which made the hot end crash into the build plate when you first powered it on. But they fixed that now too. So and they are priced really competitively for the big build volume.
Right. And that, so that's an option there. Although it could require a little bit more of that hands-on tuning sort of experience, but
exactly.
Good to mention.
On to
all right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think the Prusa MK4S is still a very capable machine, but it's just hard to recommend at the time when you get two Bamboo Lab machines for the price of one MK4.
Right.
The Prusa XL is an absolute beast, but that requires a lot of dedication. To buy it, to build it, to use it, whatever. It's like, an overpowered supercar.
And that's maybe once you're getting more advanced, and for sure. So before we get into the design, is there any Bitcoin news that you had thought to highlight, or anything you wanted to talk about?
Not really. If I'm honest, I didn't check Twitter a lot. I just noticed that last time we talked about spooks, and about 2 days later, Jason Lower reappeared.
He is.
Or appeared again.
Evergreen. What was his latest? I don't know the guy. I have DM'd with him a little bit, just on the basis that we both have had government employers at one point in our life, but I do not know him personally. What was the latest thing that he was talking about?
I have no idea. I have him blocked.
Oh, okay. All right, so I'm going to stop my sharing, and
then I'm going to
I guess let's get to it. Let's get to the design part.
So, can you see my Fusion 360 now?
Absolutely.
That's cool. Okay. We got it here, but I probably shouldn't have shared that already, because like this, we're going to be able to see better what it's all about.
Yeah, for sure.
This is the print I want to talk about. It's a Tamper Evident case for the SeedHammer plates, which is based on your seed keeper. So the concept is based on your seed keeper design with these cool locking cubes. And here we have a print in place hinge. A bit hard to...
And is that the SeedHammer single sig backup plate, or is it one of the multi-sig ones?
That is one of the multi-sig plates. It's the SH2. Yes.
Which is, I'm not familiar with their numbering scheme. Is that for a 2 of 3 or a 3 of 5?
I think both of them are possible, if I recall correct. I think the 2 just refers to the thickness of the plate, because there's the SH3 is bigger. So that can't be the case, but I honestly am also not sure about their naming scheme or their nomenclature, because I still haven't tried my SeedHammer, unfortunately. So yeah, there's just one plate inside, which needs a bit of fiddling to get out, but that's intended. Just hard on camera.
I have to ask, what's the, is it just a time issue why you haven't tried the SeedHammer yet?
Pardon?
Is it just not, being busy with other things that you haven't tried the SeedHammer yet?
It's being busy. No, absolutely not. I'm not busy with other things, and also not because I somehow dislike the project. I actually like the idea very much. It was just personal, because me and another Bitcoiner from Austria bought the thing together, and he got it delivered. And we've been trying for months to meet up to build our SeedHammer, but we didn't. He's very busy. I'm very busy. Yeah, or to just unpack it for the first time and try that.
Okay.
So I've been having it for a year and not even seen it yet. It's a bit sad.
And just in case people aren't familiar with the enclosure that you were just holding up, on one end there is a series of loopholes that you can put a disposable seal through. And the idea is that you would put the backup plate inside of there, and then you thread the seal through. And what this is designed is to give you some sort of tamper evidence, because to access the backup plate inside of that enclosure, they would have to remove and reattach, or they would have to mess with that seal. Those kind of seals are available on Amazon or other websites, so it's not a perfect solution, but it can provide you with some sort of heightened assurance that your plates haven't been accessed, especially if you're keeping them somewhere like in a bank's safe deposit box. A highly skilled, very determined adversary would maybe be more likely to be able to access something in one of those and replace the seal in a way that maybe you didn't realize it had been accessed. But for most situations, if somebody's snooping in a safe deposit box, or if they're snooping in your safe at home and they want to open this and say, oh, what's this? You would know. I think it's a very reasonable safeguard to give you some assurance that your seed material hasn't been accessed.
Exactly. Especially in regards to multi-sig, where one seed being accessed is not a disaster per se, but you just know you'll have to change your setup. So back to sharing my screen. Go. Now it lets me. So this is a used file. Sounds strange, but it's like that. I designed another thing in there, which were the Tamper Evident containers for the regular steel QRs.
Mm-hmm.
Those were a bit of a chaotic design, so we're starting here because that's much easier to follow. As you said, everything starts with a sketch. And our sketch is just this one, which is the outer perimeter of the SeedHammer SH2 plate I showed before, with the screw holes there and a slide offset. And from this...
And can I ask, was that just from manual measurements that you made that sketch of the SeedHammer backup plate, or was there... I don't know if their specifications are published or measurements or anything.
They are absolutely public. I found them on their website, and I started with this because I didn't actually have the plate here when I started the design. Nice. Then I just extruded this to 2 millimeters. So we have the plate here. And slap the sticker on top so we can see what it is. This is just a picture I downloaded from the SeedHammer website. And the main reason why I did this was, here outlined in the next step, was to make sure that my filleting, so the rounding of the outer corners, would match the design of the plate, because I didn't have concrete information on that.
Now, I'm sure that people who are less familiar with Fusion are going to be very curious how you applied that. It looks like a skin, but is that, did you use the canvas mechanism, or was that a different tool that you used?
I can show you. So you can just let's hide the sketch for a second. Then we have our SeedHammer plate here, and we can just select a face and go to Insert, and I use it in German, so here it's Aufkleber. The translation would be sticker, but it's probably canvas. And then you can place a file which you can search on your computer. On there you have the option to scale it, you have the option to move it around.
The scaling feature is particularly powerful because it allows you to take a photo of a real-world object, and you can measure the real-world object, and then you can apply that scale in your design to the picture that you've imported, and it really does give you the ability to more precisely interact with real-world things.
Yeah, you can even scale everything else to the picture, or give the picture, just mark 2 points in the picture, and Fusion will, where you have found out one of the dimensions, and Fusion will automatically scale it for you, which sometimes works really well, sometimes absolutely not. So then I just created the holes in the plate. So it's a realistic representation of the SeedHammer plate. Then I will just hide that sticker again. Hide this plate. And now we're going into the meat of it. This is the sketch of the bottom part, so of the base part with which I started, which is essentially just, again, the outer perimeter with a bunch of offsets with about 1.2 millimeters. I like multiples of layer heights and multiples of line widths, which printers work with, and the most printers are working with a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, so we have a line width of roughly 0.4 millimeter, a bit more.
And what is this may become obvious as we get further into the design, but the multiple offsets there, what are those eventually going to make up?
We need an outer wall of the thing, which is basically this offset here, but we also need a place where the inner wall, which will from the top part, will overlap and dig into this part, so it's really close, because otherwise someone could try to pry it open for a millimeter and look inside. We don't want that.
Either look inside or slip the plate out, or yeah.
Exactly. So we need a middle channel for this upper wall, which will protrude into the lower part to go in there. And then we also have a bit of offset here because there needs to be some room where your finger can come in and pry the plate out. Because if we put the plate in here without any way to access it from the side, we'll just never get it out without breaking the thing.
Right. So another way of saying it is that double overlapping shell is kind of another security feature that would require you to really damage or deform the outer enclosure to be able to even just peek at the inside. So yeah,
exactly. So
a ton of sense.
This sketch is really just the one thing plus the offsets which I dragged out to make some room in here. So and then I just did an extrude for the base, or the lower face of the base, another one for this wall, and another one for the outer wall. Not sure why I didn't do those in one, but that's just things you ask yourself when you come back to designs from. And you can see it because the body is hidden. Next thing I did was to mirror this lower part. Maybe I can show it better in here. So I just took the bottom part and mirrored it to the top as a new body. So I have the same up there, because when you building anything print in place, which or designing anything that's print in place with a hinge and meant to lock, it's always good to design like this, like I did here, with both parts on top of each other, because you can add the hinge then and you'll get a fairly realistic range of motion, and you'll also know that the parts fit together, because it'll be very hard if you do it the other way around.
Just to provide a little bit of additional detail, in Fusion there are various levels of mirroring. Like if you are making a sketch and you have specific elements of the sketch, like a straight line or a curve or multiple lines or whatever, you can create a mirror of those components of the sketch itself. But in Fusion, you can actually mirror an entire object to create a secondary object that is obviously a reflection of the other one. And that's, I just wanted to provide that elaboration.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for that. I'll keep forgetting that because I'm just so used to it. You can also mirror almost anything in Fusion. You can mirror a single face, but you can also mirror stuff from your timeline. So you can pick 4 extrudes and mirror them to the other side if you want. It's not always going to work out well, but it's possible.
And an important part with a clamshell design like this is when you mirror the one object into the other object, the mirror line or the plane that you mirror on is pretty important. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely. The plane that you mirror on should be, so in this case, just this top plane. That you pick.
Right.
So they are flush with each other. Then what I did, I can show you that because it doesn't document whenever you're measuring something, which is good. Then I clicked on this top face and on this bottom face, let it measure, and did see that's exactly 1 millimeter, and that was a bit low for a thing that should be tamper evident and holding a metal plate. So I increased just the thickness of those bottom layers, which were these 2 steps here. And next part is the hinge, which is probably the most interesting of this design. Print in place hinges are absolutely wild when you make them the first time or when you use them the first time, but they're actually not hard to make at all. So we just take a box, which is our two parts here. Then what I did was project these two faces, because when we look from the top, you'll see, because they are rounded, we have no outer edge that will be in the sketch, because the sketch is on the mid plane here. Oh, whoop, I didn't show you the mid plane. Before I made the sketch, I just created this mid plane by clicking on construct mid plane and selecting those two outer planes, and then it will automatically generate a plane that is at the perfect midpoint of those two things.
And the nice thing about that is if you were to subsequently change the basic dimensions of it, you don't have to adjust the placement of that plane again, because it'll automatically just find the center of the object that you...
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then this hinge is essentially just 3 circles with a bit of an offset, so they shouldn't be sticking to the body you want to attach them to. That's important later when we want to move the hinge. And then just one line which parts the two. And this part here will be the pin of the hinge. This part here is empty. It's just the offset, and this is the outer main part of the hinge.
And once you find the differential that makes sense, the spacing that you need between the pin and the outer part of the hinge, I've found you can just generally reuse. Once you figure out what that ideal spacing is, at least for you, you can just reuse it in any other design that calls for a hinge potentially. But sometimes it's going to depend on your specific printer, and it's also going to depend partly on the layer height that you're choosing to print your objects at, because that can affect the tolerance in that spacing.
Absolutely. Like, the better your printer is configured and maintained and calibrated, the less you can get away with. But it's always good to pick a relatively normal offset, so people with other printers can print it too if you want to publish the file, which not everyone wants.
Absolutely.
So for me, 0.35 millimeters is the absolute lowest. I go with offsets for hinges, sometimes a bit more. It also depends on the object you're making, because the hinge has to be stable enough.
And this concept of printing two objects in place that are intertwined with one another is not something that many people... At first, it can be difficult to wrap your head around it. Like, I remember showing one of these to my daughter and saying it was all printed together as one piece, and she had to think about it for a minute, because it's a little bit of... If you don't understand how it's building the layers, it permanently integrates these two things during the printing process. So there's after the print's done, there's never a time that they have been non-connected. It's the simplest example of this is if you were to try to print a chain and you print each of the links at the same time, such that during the fabrication process they are intertwined naturally as they are. It's just an interesting concept, because the like I said, the items being intertwined while they're being manufactured isn't something that always clicks for people.
Yeah, that's an absolute superpower of 3D printing in general, because no other manufacturing process will be able to do that. Just try to inject mold a hinge. Good luck. And you can do live hinges, but they'll break after some time. So then I just extruded my part from the midplane with a symmetrical extrude to a predetermined length. Then I used that same sketch. Let me show this here, because that's actually one thing I took an embarrassingly long time to figure out, you can, okay, that was just the offset I made. So you don't have to have the sketch from which you extrude in the exact face where you want to extrude. So I just used this face, and then here in this menu I just defined an offset which I measured out before, which in this case is 32.072 millimeters, and then extruded this part, this hinge part, through to a fifth of this whole length from this here to this here, from this edge to this edge, which gave me the thing I wanted. And then I took away 0.4 millimeters again, so they won't scratch into each other.
Mm-hmm. And I think what you were describing before was the project feature within a sketch. Is that what you were talking about not redrawing the specific shape over and over again?
No, you don't even have to project. Just let me just show this here for a second. I can pick this part of the sketch, hit E for extrude, and if I pull it now, it will obviously come out from here. But I can say, we can define where the extrude starts. So I can say I want it to start here. Click this object and then pull it out, and it will make it from here. Okay. I can also cancel the object and say I want it from an offset. And then I say the offset is like 40 millimeters or minus 40, and it will adjust the extrude. So as long as it's in line with where you want to have it, you can use one sketch for multiple extrudes, like these three are here. Because a younger version or earlier version of me would probably have made 3 sketches for that, which can be quite annoying.
No, you just taught me something. This is one of those instances where there's multiple ways to skin a cat, as they say, and I was not even aware that was a thing that was possible.
So then I offset some faces. Oh, okay. Here. I extruded the first part of the top hinge part. And Fusion won't let me click my timeline. Just a second.
And while you're doing that, I'll also point out that people who are more familiar with printing and design will realize this, but this is not going to print in this particular orientation.
No, it's not.
Or at least both parts aren't. One part will have that well, but the other half, before you print it, and we'll get there, but you are designing right now knowing the final orientation of both of the parts when they'll be printed on the build plate, and that's a part of the design process that comes after understanding how things print and how you can and can't print things, and then the design process.
That's the thing with 3D printing. You have to design for the process. So what I did then was just use the midplane I made before, or I made earlier, and then just mirror this part through the midplane over. So we have the perfect spacing already here.
And then I'm curious.
Then I extruded these parts to connect them with the main part, because I didn't do that before. I just left a bit, like if you look very closely, you'll see a gap here. I left that at the start intentionally because it makes it easier to do all the offset things and mirroring. And then when I was done and was sure I wanted to have them where they are, I just extruded the small face into there and made
interesting.
those combine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's just some things I learned along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And then I created another plane here just to check where we are. And here, for some reason, I can't really remember, honestly, I cut them again.
I can relate to those sort of
I know why.
mysterious decisions.
Now I know, because I had to mirror them to the other side. And otherwise it would have mirrored all of the other parts with it. And I didn't want that.
Right.
So then next sketch was just this circle here for the locking tubes,
Mm-hmm.
which obviously enabled me to do one big extrude. I just pulled that out in an arbitrary distance, made it symmetrical so it's going to both sides, or changed the direction to symmetrical so it's going to both sides, and cut that out. And once that was done, I combined all the necessary parts together to one top and one bottom part. And then I gave this a different color, apparently, and converted these bodies, which were located here up there in Fusion, to components. You need those parts to be a component so you can add a hinge.
See, this is what I was curious about, because I do this in a very probably clumsy, rudimentary way.
Okay.
Instead of doing the components in the hinge, I do a rotate move and select the center of the hinge as the pivot point. But I'm curious to see this because your way is definitely better.
Yeah, that works too. But yeah, the hinging way, and letting Fusion animate the hinge can be really helpful if you're making stuff that you don't know. So where you don't know if this will work before, because Fusion will also simulate collisions or potential collisions. So here's the hinge pin, just to show it again. And the next step was adding the hinge, which is done by clicking up here on this hinge symbol, and then you have a plethora of options. In this case, I just picked the midpoint of this hinge part because for Fusion, this is a hinge and this is a hinge. We just want to animate one. So I just picked this mid part for the source point and the same mid part for this source point. And then you can define an angle where it can go to. I didn't do that because I just wanted to hinge. Click OK, and then you'll get this little flag here. And when you double click this little flag, you'll get this fancy menu where you can try out all the range of motion that you defined previously or not. It's a bit hard to move smoothly because once you get close to one of the snapping points, it'll just snap lock. But yeah, you get the idea. And then you can monitor it for potential collisions or whatever floats your boat. So, next thing I did was to make this bottom part fixated. I think, I'm not sure what is the term in English in Fusion. It's just you ground it here so it can't move. Then I just changed the position, which is just opening the case, and made the next sketch, which is just the interior of this top part. This little rectangle here is the simple cutout for the finger or for the gripping feature, where you can reach in with your fingers and get out the plate. And then the sketch for the mid wall, which will grab into the cavity that we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So where's my... Apologies for jumping around here. So then I just extruded this upwards and created this cutout here. And lastly, there's the wall, which then acts as the, potential barrier for people who might want to snoop inside.
Mm-hmm.
So then, now that I had this, I just opened and closed it a few times just to see what's happening here, if there are any collisions. This can also be checked much easier by making a cut analysis like this. So you can just select the plane and then you can scroll through your body or through all your bodies, and you will see a dissected view or intersected view.
See, you're getting into these advanced features that I am totally not familiar with, because this is basically akin to what the slicing software does when you'd be preparing this model for printing.
Yes, yes, and it's also insanely valuable for if you have multiple parts, which will block the view. So normally you can't see how they interact with each other because the one is in the way and you can't see it. And
right.
Yeah, this makes checking stuff like this. Also checking if your hinge works. You can see here the inner how the hinge is built.
Sure.
Yeah, then I noticed that there's going to be a bit of a problem on the outer side. Oh, it's wrong here. So I just resketched this part in here with a slight offset, so they are not binding with each other. And extruded this, and where is it? Then I took this wall, these features here, the blue marked ones, and pulled them back by just 0.2 millimeters, because when you're printing parts that are so close to each other, or like for the cut, they are like flush with each other, they will bind when you print them. So there is always with 3D printing, it's an exact science, but not an overly exact science. So there will be a slight amount of, not shrink. It's called shrink for injection molding, but expansion, thanks. There will be a slight amount of expansion, and 0.2 is like the minimum you'll get away with for tolerances normally.
And some of that could depend on your printer's extrusion volume, because some printers can be over extruding without people even realizing it, and that could affect the way that the spacing and the tolerance plays out.
Exactly. So then I did roughly the same for the other side, That's why this sketch is called inner offset. So I just defined a very minuscule amount, like 0.2 again, from here to here, which was then cut out from this piece. So we have a bit of a tolerance in there, which can sit flush and not bind with each other. That was this extrusion. Just extruded it down by the 2 millimeters it had to. And yeah, that's the thing with timelines of print and place parts. You'll always have a lot of opening and closing in there. It's just how it is. And then we did this sketch apparently, which is what I call the guard wall. This one. I'll see that in a second, much better. When it's extruded up there. So this one is what achieves a real lock, or like a real visual barrier between all of the parts once this is locked. Let me show this here, because this upper wall here will slot right into there. Then I did a combined cut, so I just combined the two parts and set the combined to cut, which would result into the upper part cutting, or the lower part cutting into the upper part, and I would then see that they are touching somewhere. This is just a security measure for me.
So this process is a way of testing whether or not the models physically intersect.
Yes, exactly. I'm afraid I'll have to leave for a second because someone's at the door. I'll be back in a minute.
Okay.
That was the most surprised Amazon driver ever. Ah, your mic is muted. That's why I can't hear
you. I was laughing at probably what the Amazon driver's response was.
Yeah, he knows me, but he's never seen me like that. So
did you just tell him that was some sort of cosplay thing you were doing?
Yeah, I told him I'm in an important meeting. That's how I attend important meetings. So, where was I? Yeah, like the preemptive or cautionary combined cut. So I would see if one thing cut into the other, which is just when you have lots of features, can be very helpful because you just instantly see if there is something. Don't ask how I know, or don't ask why I do this every time. So then just more opening. And what did we do here? Oh yeah, there was just a very tiny flaw where these two parts weren't connected, which I fixed in here. And the same on the other side. So more moving. Opening again. So then we have the next sketch, which is the sketch for the SD card slots, which I obviously projected. So if you're familiar with Fusion, you'll see that these lines for those are projected because they are pink or purple or whatever you want to call them. I projected those from another design, which I just brought into here. Because when you have designed something once and it works, use the dimensions you already have and don't do it again.
And I hadn't honestly thought through the inclusion of the micro SD card cutouts in this design, but I think it makes a ton of sense as I think about it, because there's always this. Obviously, you want to protect your key material from being viewed or surveilled or seen or anything like that. But with SeedHammer, which we obviously are both familiar with, there is a chance that if someone were to trick you into running modified software, that the device could do things that you didn't intend for it to do. And this, having those cutouts with your key, I think is a great way of getting additional assurances around the memory card you're using with the software, that it hasn't been somehow tampered with. Deploying a new copy of the software is obviously very simple, but this is a similar approach.
And it might not be in the future. Unfortunately, companies die, projects go extinct, GitHub servers get seized or just plain
shut down
or put offline. So I think if you're going through all the hassle of creating a multi-sig setup, it can't hurt to put your multi-sig wallet descriptors, your SeedHammer image, your SeedHammer image, whatever you have, on a micro SD card on another one. They are dirt cheap by now, and just slap it in there with each of your keys.
Yeah.
At least that's my approach. Just very foolproof. So yeah, the first extrude here was obviously just extruding those down. And then I extruded this little upper part here, this here, from the top down again. And this acts as a small retainer. So when you put in the SD card and you open up the whole case, it won't fall out instantly.
Nice.
And then I chamfered, sorry for the wild jumping, just chamfered this edge below there so the printer doesn't have to bridge a lot. It probably wouldn't have minded, but it also made it easier to insert the SD card. Then I combined, I know what I combined here. I combined those extruded parts with this because I just made a mistake and didn't choose join for the extrude, but extruded those as new bodies before. Then we have a fillet here, which just adds a bit of roundness up there and again gives us a way to grip the top of the SD card without digging into the plastic. More filleting here, because I don't like sharp edges on 3D prints. I guess no one does. More filleting, so essentially the same on the other side. I just took all of those upper faces and gave them a 0.2 millimeter fillet, which just eliminates the really rough pointy edge you can otherwise get. Well, sometimes Fusion will bug out when you have selected something, then I have to select all and hit escape, and then it will let me do stuff again. So in here, more filleting of just some edges and these inner part here. I like to give a ever so slight fillet in there because it just adds a tiny bit of material, which will in turn make the wall more stable, a bit more stable than if it would just have been printed upward. So it won't break off that easily. Because whenever you print walls upwards and they are thin, and this one is only, 1.4 millimeters thick, it will be fairly easy to break off from one side if you just go here and give it a 90-degree grab and adapt the 0.2 millimeter fillet. Does very much, but it's mostly calming me down. So
no, I think that's important. It basically anchors that part of the design a bit more during the printing process.
Yeah, then I got a bit annoyed here. I remember that because I wanted to give these edges here a chamfer instead of a fillet because it prints better, as you explained in our last episode very well. And Fusion didn't let me with this one. Sometimes Fusion is just being Fusion. Yeah. And Autodesk says, no, you can't do that. You want to do that. We know you want to do that, but we won't let you. So yeah, I
think they're telling me, no, you really don't want to do that.
No, they're telling me you want to do that, but you fucked up before. So now found out where you fucked up, and then you might be able to. I found out. I did find out.
Let you.
The thing is, when you try this, now it lets you. We go back one step. It won't.
So I have found when filleting large amounts of extruded text, sometimes it seems like it's a workload thing. Like if you just give it too much to fillet, it kind of freaks out and says, nah, not going to do that. But if you break it into multiple steps, yeah,
it's just, it's a bit picky. In this case, that wasn't that. It wasn't overloaded by 6 edges. It's the problem that it tries to pick the complete edge, including the boundaries or the next thing. And here, can you see that? That was all of the problem. Because I didn't measure this perfectly. And there was there. Yes, there was a tiny bit of space there because I forgot to deduct the 0.4 millimeters I wanted to take off here as an offset, and once I did that and we had a solid closed body here, it of course was absolutely no problem to chamfer that edge off. So this was really just my own incompetence.
It's one of those after a certain amount of cursing and finding the problem.
Exactly. So then I apparently deleted some. Oh yeah, I deleted the remains, that the filleting of these top surfaces here, because Fusion always picks everything that's next to it. I had to delete all of those to make the next chamfering on the other side work. So that's what this was, and then these got a chamfer too. So then I chop. And the last one was probably the bottom. Yes, exactly. Was a bottom chamfer by 0.4 millimeters, which is a good amount of chamfering. So you get rid of any possible elephant's foot of a printer, and you don't really see it. So you won't really see that in the, so like when I hold it up here to the camera, you can't see that 0.4 millimeter chamfer that at all, but it will feel much better. So, and then we're almost done, off to branding. I picked all of those faces which are facing each other here of our hinge, and deducted or just offset them all by minus 0.1 millimeter just to be absolutely sure that there will be no interference from the hinge parts when they move slightly diagonal. And then there was one last sketch, which is called branding, so it's obviously filled with a logo, which I again projected from another sketch. Then I took all of those, copied them over, because I don't like to work with the projected lines. Fusion tends to be weird with them, so I just copy paste them, and then they're not weird, which is a weird technique, but yeah, I think I've said weird often enough now. And yeah, just extrude that. And what was this? Oh yeah, I made a spacer, which I showed before. It's like just a plain plate, which I printed as infill only with hexagonal infill, so it looks cool, which can be put into the case as a spacer if you're only storing one plate, because due to the nature of this, 2 plates will fit inside of here. 2 plates and 4 SD cards. Yeah, and that's our whole SeedHammer Tamper Evident Container. Can shed it again to check that everything fits. And then we'll put it back here. And that's obviously how it's going to be printed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it works. It's not the most fancy thing, and it will not repel people which are really, really determined to get to your seed, but it will at least give you a good indicator if someone did spy or not.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, 100%.
Right, and that's really all I can tell you about this design. If you have any questions on some processes that were used in here, please hit me.
Is this one of the designs that is for sale on your BTC Pay server?
The file itself, no.
But I mean neither the STL or you just said the Fusion wasn't, so neither of them.
The STL, I think. Oh, let me check before I. I know I am selling the older version, the version for the steel QR I made, but I'm not really not sure if I already uploaded the SeedHammer. No, I didn't. But that's a good point. I should have to do that. I always forget uploading. There are just so many outlets.
It's an interesting line, because whenever I will design something and publish a picture of it or whatever, often the first question is, where can I download the model for free?
STL.
And I think that STL question mark.
Yeah.
And I've wrestled a lot with that because I think that the culture of 3D printing is very much in line with the FOSS movement. But there is, as you've just illustrated, there's time that goes into these designs, and not just like the time in laying out the design in the CAD software, but all the R&D and the testing and acquiring the skills. So I don't think everything needs to be released for free, and I think it's if people want to do that, I think it's generous and it's a wonderful thing. But I don't know that everyone should have to release every design that they make all the time, forever.
Absolutely.
And I am really eager to, as you've done, as I would like to get the same kind of concept set up, is selling designs that you've made for, a relatively nominal amount of money. I don't know what you charge for your design, but even just if I had designed a model like that, even, somebody paying $2 or $3 worth of Bitcoin, with, a non-commercial sort of, clause or expectation that, they're not going to buy this design for $2 or $3 and then put it in their online store and potentially, sell a bunch of them if it's a design that would interest a lot of people. So it's an ongoing discussion, but it's something that I think as we can put these designs out there and get a little bit of value back for the time and effort that we've put into them, I think that over time is going to increase the number of people who are interested in designing. It's going to make them better designers because they can realize some value for the work that they've put in. And ultimately, we're going to get better stuff because we're willing to pay a little bit of money for it.
Exactly. Absolutely. I'm fully with you on that, especially for someone like me who in part relies on sales of my 3D printed designed product to make a living. It can be really hard when people want to have all of your work that you've put into and they want it for free. That's the thing, like you said. And I love posting stuff. I love posting designs, but I have I have made a few memes responding to those early STL questions. By now, some of them are just it's not finished. It's a prototype, because that's what I love the most when I post the first iteration of something where I personally am 100% sure that there's going to be something wrong with it. And then people come and want the STL, and then if I send them the STL, they will print it, and then they will go on mocking me why this is not perfect. And yeah, that's why I stopped sharing prototypes which aren't finished, because this happened way too often. And yeah, I've also found people selling printed versions of things I designed. I mean, that's just a known topic in 3D printing that you can't really get rid of. If you post stuff for free or if you open source stuff, other people will use it to make some kind of profit with it, which might be okay in some regards, not so much in others. It's a fine line.
Some things,
it's a very fine line to walk.
For some things, it absolutely makes sense, and the all of the SeedHammer related enclosure designs that I've done are all public and available under the MIT license in our repo. But for some other things, it makes less sense. And even when you're selling a design, you don't really have any guarantees that people aren't going to print multiple copies and sell them to other people or whatever. At best, maybe you could shame them if they have an actual storefront online with items that you've designed. But it's not a perfect system, and we're not going to go out and sue anybody. But I think even as a gentleman's agreement, I think there's still some value to it, because most people understand, as long as your prices aren't outrageous, most people understand that there is time and energy and expertise that goes into this stuff that you can still provide a ton of value to somebody by charging a nominal fee for a printable design.
Absolutely, and here the BTC Pay Server's file seller plugin has been a godsend for me, because I'm just offering some of the files that I'm comfortable with sharing or selling for 1,000 sats or 2,000 sats, and there have been people downloading them for the minimum amount. There have also been people who just donated 30k sats when they like the model. It's not the norm, and it also shouldn't be, because if I ask people to pay 2,000 sats, you don't have to pay more, but you can. I think that's a nice way to do it. And with other designs that I don't want to share, I just resorted to selling them as exclusive for a while, and then when I think I have recoup my development time, and then I can open source it, like happened with the rug pill SeedHammer case, for example.
And it raises a lot of questions about V for V in my mind. That I think paywalls get a bad reputation. At a fundamental level, I know Adam Curry and the V for V model, and I just sometimes I have to wonder if humans are really wired for that type of interface. Because a lot of people out there are only going to pay for something if it's a requirement of the process of acquiring it. And case in point, in the area where I live, there was a restaurant. So there's a national chain called Panera here in the States, and it's a soup and sandwich place that's kind of fast food, but it's gourmet fast food, and they have gourmet sandwiches. And they piloted a project here in St. Louis that was a particular location where you could have your food for free. And it was basically a pay what you think this is worth kind of experiment. And it eventually it shut down. I think they ran that experiment for a year or two. And it was in an area where you might have some homeless people. And so there was an option. If you're really hungry, you don't have any money, but you really want to provide some value, you could work in the restaurant for an hour or something like that. They'd have you wipe down the tables or, do something to clean up, take out the trash or whatever. But ultimately, it failed because it's great as an ideal, and it's great when it works out that way. But ultimately, I don't know. I'm just going to say I think paywalls get a bad rep.
Yeah, I think that can work. And yeah, paywalls get a bad rep. And I personally hate paywalls myself. But with some things, you just need them. To go back on this, or to answer on your story with the food, I think this, what is it called? It's not all inclusive eating.
Oh, like a buffet?
Yeah, like this buffet where you can just eat as much as you want.
Oh, you can eat buffet, yeah.
I think those are already tailored to this experience where people want to eat as much as possible for as low cost as possible, but giving it away for outright free, that's just like a stupid idea. Right. Depending on where you are. But on the other hand, I think people can be wired for this because just the absolute contrary story, we have a farmer near us, a few kilometers away, where we are getting our milk. They have a kind of electronical device which is being filled with freshly tapped milk, and we can just go there and fill our bottles. And this woman doesn't have a security camera there. She just also doesn't have any way of paying. You just put the money there on the counter. There will be no one here. It's just a trust-based thing, and it works really well. But as you said, it's very dependent on where you are and how high is the financial pressure there. And yeah, I think maybe with better money that could work. That's what I wanted to say.
With a better money, or with more convenient payment mechanism, it's and it depends on the cultural norms in the place where you're attempting this. Like I camp with my kids a lot, and you will find at a lot of campgrounds, people who live within a mile of the campground have a hustle. Well, they'll put out firewood in bundles, and they'll just have a cash box out. And if you want to pay $5 for a bundle of firewood, you can just leave the cash there and grab it. There's, like you were saying with the woman with the milk, there's no video monitoring. There's no, enforcement or anything like that. And it generally works. But if you went into downtown New York and put out, a counter's worth of sandwiches on the sidewalk with a jar that said $5 per sandwich, I would suspect that very quickly you would have a lot less money and a lot less sandwiches.
Probably.
It depends on the culture and the people involved too. It's a complicated
Absolutely.
problem. I just know that if I say this a lot, that Bitcoin podcasts need to have their kind of Joe Rogan moment, where somebody who is providing significant value and that people enjoy listening to just says, you know what, if you're going to listen to my podcast, you're going to have to stream, pick a number, 10 sats a minute, or, what, that's probably a low number, but whatever it is. Or, it's an initial paywall where, if you pay 2,000 sats, you get perpetual access to this episode to listen as many times as you want to or whatever. But I personally like podcasts that I listen to regularly every week, and the person has a reputation for providing value. I personally would have no problem with that. We run into a little bit of an annoyance with the tax consequences because of all the capital gains stuff. But anyhow, I'll get off my soapbox. I do have one question about the milk. Is the milk pasteurized or is it raw milk?
The milk is pasteurized because it's law to pasteurize it here, and it also makes it not spoil so fast.
Yeah. I was just curious. I know nothing about dairy.
Milk is a rabbit hole in itself. So Austria is like the country with the absolutely highest food standards that I know of. And still, the milk industry is a big scam. Not a scam, but it's cruel. It's cruel, and my wife hates it because she loves animals. I love animals too, but she does it more, obviously. And so we found out that even in Austria, where we thought the cows would have a relatively nice life giving milk, when a cattle is born, the cattle is ripped away from the mother cow in the first 20 minutes of it being born. And that's very cruel. And my wife searched for a small farm where this doesn't happen, and we can be very happy now because we found it.
Yeah, so we support the change that you want to see in the world.
Exactly.
Cool.
Man, we've gone about
a long time. A little bit longer this time. We went about an hour and a half.
Yeah, you brought me to one thing that I'll have to say here. This is a value for value show.
Now, since we mentioned it.
Yeah. We're not on Fountain, obviously, because I think Fountain only supports spoken or only audio, no video. Maybe we'll find a video value for value platform in due time, but for now, we're bound to YouTube.
And is there a particular... I don't even know. If people wanted to throw a few sats our way, I don't even know where we would point them at this point.
Yeah, we can only point them to you and me, but we didn't set up anything for that. We might.
I'll have to work on that.
Because we might in the future, but I think that highlights our priorities here very well.
Yeah. And the other thing I would mention, like the other way that if we're doing this V for V thing, feedback is a big deal. So we are still, the part where we go through a design, we're still figuring out what makes the most sense for that. And on one end, there's we're going to design this thing from scratch live with you watching, which is like the extremely long version. And then the extremely short version is I'm just going to step through and maybe briefly touch on a couple of things. And then there's a lot of room in the middle. And I think today we were definitely in the middle of that part, but I've already gotten a little bit of feedback from other people, some who say, I'd like to see you design the whole thing from scratch. And other people say, like, maybe that was a little too belabored, and I'd really just like to see the overview. So I continue to ask for feedback on that, about, what is entertaining and informative to people with regard to the design that we go through, so we can figure out maybe what the best middle ground is for that.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. I also think that will once we went through more designs than two, that will a bit of develop itself, because not every model is suitable for this long format. Some are just a few steps, or some might have not so many design steps which are interesting to go into. And yeah, we obviously don't want to bore any viewers, so if it was too long, tell us. But I think I honestly didn't get a lot of feedback. It's cool that you got feedback.
I failed to. I didn't get a ton, but I probably failed to pass on a little bit of feedback. So
you got some.
Maybe a central point of feedback is YouTube comments. So if you're willing to leave a YouTube comment, that's probably a good place where we'll both see it.
Yes, that's a great idea.
All right.
Great. Then let's end this else? For today.
Yep.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for doing this with me. People, leave feedback. Don't be scared of the mask. And yeah, it's block time 844456. And Beautiful. We're leaving. Have a great day, everyone.